Another day, another dollar. This is such an American phrase because it really equates time with money. So a lot of times when we wake up and we don't want to go to work, we just say another day, another dollar. This means I just have to go to work today. I have to get my work done so that I can get paid. And once it's over with and I'll be home. So you might hear American English speakers use this phrase, another day, another dollar.
Hi. Another day, another dollar.
I've got to get to work. Now, when you say this sentence, it really blends together. I've got to get to work. I've got to get to work. So practice saying it while you're listening to this lesson. I've got to get to work. This just means that you're running out of time. It's time to go to work. So you might be eating breakfast and having a nice conversation, and all of a sudden you say, oh, it's 7 o'clock. I've got to get to work. That means I need to leave now. A lot of times we use these expressions. We say, I'm running on time, I'm running early, or I'm running late. If you're on time, that means you're going to make it to your work or whatever your destination is at the exact time you need to be there. If you're running early, it means you have extra time. You will probably be at your destination or your work early. And if you're running late, this is the expression we use to say that we need to go fast because we are going to be late if we don't start moving. We're probably going to be past the expected time that we need to be there. Try not to run late because it is so stressful. When it's time to get lunch when you're at work, you might just say, let's go to lunch. That means let's take a break and maybe we're just eating lunch in our office location or we're going to get lunch, but it's just time for lunch. Let's go get lunch. Now, another verb that we use when we're talking about going to get food is we say, let's grab lunch together. You can use this for any meal, really. Let's grab a snack together. Let's grab breakfast together. This just means let's go get it together. It's just a very casual way to say, let's get some food. The next 5 sentences will help you talk about how busy you are during your day at work. If you want to say that you're having an easy day, you might say, today is light. My workload is light. That means there's not many things to do. This would be the opposite of having a heavy workload. Or you could say, today is a breeze. We call something a breeze when it's easy to do. So you could say, getting a job is a breeze for me because I'm very qualified. That means it's easy for you to get any job because you have lots of qualifications. Maybe you have a lot of work experience or you have a lot of education that people really like when you are applying for jobs. When you want to say that you are busy with something, you can say you are tied up with it. A common sentence you might use is, I'm tied up with calls this afternoon. Or you might say, I'm tied up all afternoon. This means you're busy. When we say tied up, imagine like someone can't move because their arms are tied, but really they're not tied. They just have a lot of people to talk to or a lot of things to do, so they can't give attention to anyone else. If you want to say that your boss is busy, you could say they are tied up today. That means they cannot talk to anyone else. Another way to say that we have lots of things to do is we say we are up to our neck. We can say, I am up to my neck in meetings today. This means I have so many meetings. Again, there's not room to do anything else for the day besides the scheduled meetings. If you want to say that you have been busy solving a lot of problems, you could use this sentence. You could say, I've put out a ton of fires today. It's like every problem in your work or your office is a fire, and you are a firefighter and you have to pour water on them or solve the problem. So this is an idiom. To put out fires means to solve problems. Here are 4 phrases that would probably be pretty useful and common when you're talking about ending the workday. You can, of course, say, let's call it quits. This just means let's end the day. It's a really casual, common phrase. Let's call it quits. Or you can say, let's call it a day. That means that's the end of the day. We're going to call this the end of the day. But we just say, let's call it a day. And two really funny phrases that are also used quite frequently is you can say, thank God it's Friday, TGIF. This just means I'm happy that the weekend is here. It's the last workday of the week. Or if it's Wednesday, sometimes American English speakers say, happy hump day. Now, we think about a hump as a camel's hump or hill. And when we make it past Wednesday in the week, that means the rest of the week, there's only 2 days before the weekend. So the middle of the week we call hump day. And this is kind of a joking, casual phrase we use with our friends in English. Hump day for Wednesday. Let's talk about leaving work and some sentences that you might hear or you might need to use in English when leaving work and going about the rest of your day. So when we talk about traffic that does not move in major cities in the United States, of course, the traffic is terrible, just like major cities all around the world. We say we are in bumper to bumper. You could say, I'm in bumper to bumper traffic. That means there's so many cars that it's like they're in a parking lot and their bumpers are touching on the road. Sometimes when there's construction, there's always construction, and we have to take a different way because either the traffic is so bad or a road is closed. We take a different way to get home or to get to our destination than we usually do. We call that a detour. I have to take a detour. Or sometimes in English, if we have an unexpected stop on the way to somewhere we're driving, we say, I took a detour on the way here and picked up some ice cream. Something that's unexpected that you stop and do, we can sometimes call a detour. But normally we use this sentence, I have to take a detour, when we have to go around traffic or we have to go around construction work on a road. I'm running a few errands on my way home. The word errands means tasks, things that you have to go in your car or go out of your house to do. You have to go get some things or you have to drop some things off. Like for instance, my errands usually are picking up groceries, dropping off mail or packages at the post office, and maybe grabbing a coffee, things like this. Just very simple tasks that you drive around in your car and do is called running errands. And if you need to get food from the grocery store, a common sentence you might use is, I'm picking up a few groceries. To pick up is a phrasal verb that means to get. I'm picking up a few groceries is the most casual and common way we say we're going to get food from the grocery store. If your car is running out of gasoline, we say, I'm stopping to get gas. Or you can say, I'm stopping for gas. That means you're stopping for gasoline in your car. You can say, I'm getting gas, or I'm running on empty, or sometimes Americans will even say, I'm running on E. I need to get gas. E stands for empty. When you look at your fuel gauge, you'll see the empty, and in English, we like to say E for empty. And sometimes me, personally, I'm always paranoid that I will run out of gas, so I get gas when I already have like a half a tank of gas. I just like to have a full fuel tank. It makes me really happy and satisfied. I will say I'm topping off the gas. So this means the gas isn't empty. It's actually probably half full or even more full, but I'm just going to get a little more while we're stopped. If you top off a drink, that means the drink isn't empty, but you're just filling the cup with more to the top. You're filling the gas tank to the top when you're topping it off. I'm grabbing a bite on my way home. This can either mean you're grabbing it to bring it home or you're stopping at a restaurant to eat some dinner. If you say, I'm picking up dinner, usually you're telling someone at home, maybe your husband or your wife, whoever, you're going to bring an already made dinner home from a restaurant. You're getting takeout. Sometimes my husband is on his way home from work. He will call me and he will say, have you made dinner or do you want me to pick up dinner? And sometimes if I haven't had time to cook, maybe the day has just been very busy, I'll say, yes, please pick up dinner. That means please buy dinner from a restaurant and bring it home. And when you're deciding what is for dinner, you could say what's for dinner, of course. But you can also ask someone questions like, what about Chinese? Or how does Chinese sound? This means how does Chinese food sound? We can replace Chinese with How does Italian sound? How does Mexican sound? How does Ethiopian sound? Any type of food we like to say in the United States, how does it sound? That means, do you like it? Does it sound good to you for dinner right now? If you have something that you really like and you want to eat for dinner, you can suggest it by saying, I could go for pizza, or I could go for Italian, or I could go for Mongolian, whatever type of food it is. If you say, I could go for it, it means you would like to eat it. It sounds very appetizing to you. Let's talk about some activities you might do when you get home from work. You might say, I'm going to go for a run. Go for a run means you're going to go out running. Or you can say, I'm going to take a stroll. The phrase to take a stroll means to go for a nice leisurely walk just for enjoyment and exercise. If you want to watch a movie, you might say, let's turn on a movie. That means let's start a movie. And if you're like me, I've got to pick up the house before I go to bed. This means I need to clean everything and put everything back where it goes. I like when the dishes are done. I like when the laundry is done. I like when all the toys are put away. Things like that mean to pick up the house. When I need to do some laundry, I say, I'm going to run a load of laundry. This means I'm going to start by washing the clothes and then putting them in the dryer. To run a load of laundry means to clean your clothes and to dry them. And when you have dishes in the United States, we commonly have dishwashers in our kitchen, and we say we're going to load the dishwasher. So that means we're going to take the dishes that we use for dinner or whatever meal, and we're going to put them in the dishwasher. We say we're going to load the dishwasher. Another common chore is taking out the trash. I've got to take out the trash. One day a week, the trash truck comes to my house and picks up my trash can and then puts it back and drives away. So I have to take out the trash the night before. That means I have to put the trash can on the curb so that the trash truck can take the trash. When your jobs are finally done for the day, it's time to go to bed. You might say, I'm headed to bed. This just means you're going to go to your bedroom, you're going to start getting ready for bed, you're going to brush your teeth, and then you're going to go to sleep. You're just giving a warning, I'm headed to bed. You're tired. Or sometimes we use this idiom, we say, I'm going to hit the hay. This means I'm going to go to sleep. If you feel tired, you might say, I am tuckered out, or I'm tired out. These both mean the same thing. They just mean very tired. What I always like to say is, it's past my bedtime. Even though I'm an adult, I don't have parents that are telling me to go to bed. I like to kind of joke and say, well, it's past my bedtime. I'm very tired if I'm up late ever. One thing that I am definitely guilty of is scrolling social media before I go to sleep. So I might say, I'm going to scroll social media for a few minutes. That just means I'm going to look at all the social media apps on my phone. We call that scrolling. It means you're just looking to see what's going on social media. And what I tell my kids every night is, good night, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite. But don't worry, I don't have bed bugs. This is just a really common way to say goodnight in a cute way in the United States. So if you hear an English speaker in the United States say, don't let the bed bugs bite, there's no bed bugs. Hopefully there's no bed bugs. It's just like a cute thing that we say to one another. Do you have any phrases like this in your first language? Let me know in the comments because I think this one is super funny. To flare up.
Joints flaring up?
If something flares up, the literal meaning is it increases in intensity all of a sudden. Oftentimes when we're talking about fire, we're talking about it flaring up into the sky. So it's just a quick burst of intensity. Quite frequently in English, we use this phrase in an informal medical context. If you have a rash or some sort of chronic disease that stops for a while, but then all of a sudden it gets really bad, we say that it flares up. So maybe you have arthritis, which is, soreness in your joints, and it gets bad sometimes and it starts to really irritate you. You can say that your arthritis is flaring up. A lot of times too, if people have rashes, like marks on their skin, and they start to get really bad, we can say their rash is flaring up. If two people begin to argue, You can say that they are having a flare up in their emotions and their arguments. So, a lot of times, if two countries are about to go to war, we can say tensions are flaring up. So, they're becoming more intense in a short period of time. To scrape by.
Just scraping by. Thanks.
This phrase is kind of like saying to get by, but implies that there is a really bad hardship or challenge that you're surviving through. The most common way we use this phrase to scrape by is when someone doesn't have a lot of money or a lot of resources and they're just barely surviving. Another idiom is to make ends meet.
2 jobs to make ends meet.
So this means getting enough money to pay all your bills and to survive and have food and just comfort in your life with your money. So if you are scraping by, you are just making ends meet. There's double idioms in one sentence for you. If you are waiting for your paycheck on Friday because you don't have any money left, you are just scraping by. Maybe you're taking the bus instead of driving, or maybe you are eating ramen noodles instead of going out to eat and having a big dinner. So you're just doing the bare minimum to scrape by and survive. If we're not using this idiom in a financial context, we're using it in a more casual context. If you're just doing the bare minimum, so the baseline or a small amount to do well, maybe in school or at work, you can say you're just scraping by. If you're in school and you're very busy, let's say you're in a university or college, and you're just barely getting the reading done, you're barely doing your homework because you just don't have a lot of time to dedicate to it, you can say, I am going to pass my class, I'm going to get an okay grade, but I am just scraping by right now. I don't feel like I'm doing very well. You can use this in a more negative context as well. You can say they're just doing enough to scrape by at work. This means they're not doing a lot of good work. They're not being very successful or hardworking. They're doing a very small amount just to survive and just to keep their job. Instead of saying that you're going to change something very small, a very small amount of change to something, we have a really good slang word in English that we use very commonly. The word is to tweak something.
Is she okay? I think she tweaked something.
So this can be used instead of saying to change something, but if we say tweak, we're just changing it a little bit. The word tweak reminds me of a sound that a bird would make, a very small bird. So if you can remember, tweak means small change, kind of like a small bird sound. When computer programmers are building software or apps, they have a lot of code that they're doing, and sometimes just a very small amount of the code can be incorrect, and it can create a big error. But if they just go in and tweak the code, it can fix everything, even though it's just a small change. It's just a small tweak. We use this a lot in creative contexts as well. Maybe you are offering someone some feedback on their art or their music, and you say, it's really good. I wouldn't really change anything, but I might just tweak this part, or I might just tweak the word that you wrote here, that you drew here. In another very common context, we use this word to tweak something is when we're cooking, because again, if you have a recipe with a lot of different ingredients, even just making a small change can make the recipe taste that much better. So you might just need to tweak your recipe or the ingredients and food that you're adding to make the meal. Sometimes you can tweak a recipe by just adding a little bit of salt and pepper, and it makes it taste a lot better. My next phrase is not only something that Americans say in real life, in everyday conversation out loud, but also we use this a lot in either our texting, our emails, or our comments online. This is a texting abbreviation that's very casual. So the phrase is not gonna lie. And we abbreviate that to NGL. You might see this pop up online once in a while. Sometimes Americans say, honestly, I don't like that dress, or honestly, this party isn't very fun. So these are kind of rude statements that we might say to our friends just to provide honesty and just tell them the exact truth. And sometimes instead of saying that, I notice that younger people, still adults, this isn't a phrase that only children use. This is one that young adults, even into their 30s or 40s, maybe even 50s would use. They say, not gonna lie, I don't like that dress, or not gonna lie, this party is pretty boring. So the phrase just implies that even though you know what you're saying is kind of rude or a little bit mean, you have to tell the person it because being honest is important to you. So usually we start this phrase when we're talking about something negative to someone, but we can also use this phrase to admit the truth to someone if we're a little bit embarrassed about it. So we can use this phrase to say, I'm not gonna lie, I like that movie even though it's made for kids. For instance, maybe you're a big fan of the Minions movie. I love Minions. I just think they're funny and cute. I don't know. I have a Minion planter in my house and other Minion things. But some people would say that's kind of embarrassing because it's a children's movie, but I'm not going to lie. I like Minions. So the phrase is not gonna lie. And sometimes you say, not gonna lie, I like Minions. Or we can say the full phrase a little bit more formally. I'm not going to lie. I like Minions. NGL is how we abbreviate this when we're writing as well. So just remember, only use this phrase, not going to lie, when you are not filtering what you're saying. You don't care who hears your opinion or who hears the truth or something rude that you're going to say. The next slang phrase is triggered.
Triggered.
So sometimes we use this kind of in a mean, rude way, like, oh, is this triggering you right now? So this is meaning like, is this making you angry or upset? And usually when we say this, we're kind of implying that what we are talking about or what we are seeing shouldn't be a big deal. And if we're triggering someone, we're making them upset or sad for kind of no reason. So this can be used in a really rude way. Especially I see people kind of bully each other online with this. Now, sometimes we do give trigger warnings on videos and books and movies and things, saying like, if you are sensitive about this, trigger warning. If you are sensitive about this kind of subject, usually it's something very serious like death or maybe addiction or illnesses. If you are sensitive about this, if this makes you too emotional, trigger warning, don't watch this because this will trigger you or upset you. So if something triggers something else or someone else, it is starting either an emotional process or just some sort of process in general. Maybe you have seasonal allergies, things like grass and trees, and pollen outside makes you sneeze and get stuffed up in your nose. I know I have those sometimes. If I go outside when it's super hot and sunny out, my allergies will be triggered. So again, this means my allergies will start. They will be activated. And again, you can use this phrase triggered in a really serious context or a less serious context. You could say, wow, that movie really triggered my emotions. This doesn't mean it made you like kind of sad or happy or just, have a lot of feelings. It doesn't have to be so serious, like a trigger warning, like it's going to make you too emotional. So we use this phrase triggered in a lot of different contexts. A lot of times when we give someone medication, instead of asking, is the medication helping? Is it starting to work? In a more informal slang context, we will say, has the medication kicked in yet?
Is coffee kicked in?
When we're talking about allergies, sneezing, runny nose, coughing, we might say, oh, I wish my allergy medication would kick in. This means you wish it would start to work. It would start to be active in your body. If someone is having some sort of mind-altering substance like alcohol or drugs, let's say someone is drinking, a shot of alcohol, of vodka, you can say, has the vodka kicked in yet? This means, do you feel the effects of that thing? Another really common way we use this phrase kicked in is when someone has a really intense emotional or physical reaction to something. We often say that their adrenaline kicked in. This means there's an emergency going on. Let's say, you see a child and they fall into a river and they're about to drown. You could say, my adrenaline kicked in and I jumped in the water and saved the child. Adrenaline is, the substance, the hormone in your body that helps you do things in stressful situations. So when you get adrenaline, you are usually braver, you jump into action really quickly, especially if there's an emergency. So when we use the phrase kicked in, we're talking about the point when something starts to affect you, you start to feel the effects of something that you're either having in your body or, just something that is affecting you in any sort of emotional or physical way. Did you know in English, when you want to call someone very professional, very good at what they do, you can call them a class act.
Class act.
For instance, let's say there is conflict at work and your boss really helps everyone manage the conflict and start to get along. You can say, my boss is an absolute class act, especially the way they handled this conflict. So it just means that they did a really good job and they're very professional. Another way that we commonly use this phrase, a class act, is when we describe a person on a sports team who is very kind. They have good sportsmanship. So that means even if they lose, they don't get very angry and mad. They make their team feel really good. They tell people good job on the field, and they might just be a good role model or a good example for children. We call that person a class act. Maybe you just know someone in your life who will help people even if no one is looking. They just always are trying to do the right thing. You could describe them as a class act. So when we say that someone has class, we can also say that they are, very professional and very polite, always doing the right thing. And then if we want to call someone very classy, we can say they are a class act. Instead of just saying that someone was absolutely correct or absolutely accurate, a more casual slang phrase that we use is spot on.
Spot on. Spot on.
When you say that someone is spot on, you can mean they're accurate. Like you could say, your financial predictions were spot on. That means they were exact. Your predictions, the things that you guessed were going to happen, were spot on. Again, if someone is guessing what a problem is, maybe you're like, what is wrong with my car? And someone says, there might be a leak in the fluid in this part of your engine. I don't know a lot about cars, but let's say they make a really good guess and then it turns out to be true when you bring your car to the mechanics. You can say your guess about what was wrong with the car was spot on. That means it was accurate. The last way we use the phrase spot on is when someone is imitating a different person or they're trying to pretend to be them while acting in a movie or a play or something. We can say that their portrayal of the person was spot on. We talked about what it means to trigger someone or something, but we can also use the phrase set off to mean something kind of similar. I'll show you in the different contexts we use the phrase set off rather than trigger. If you have an alarm somewhere in your house, to detect someone coming in or out of the house, you can say, if you open that door, it will set off the alarm. You can also say, if you open the door, it will trigger the alarm. That means it will start a loud noise in the alarm system to let you know that there might be an intruder or a criminal in your house. When something that someone does starts an argument or a debate, you can say, when he started talking about politics, it triggered a debate between everyone, or it set off an argument, or it set off a debate. When something starts automatically by, something else, you can say it was set off. So for instance, I have cameras around my house, and if there's motion or movement around the house, it will set off the cameras and they will begin to record. The next phrase that we use very informally in English, but again, incredibly common, is to say that you're going to go for a run for something.
I want you and Smith to go on a beer run.
So you don't have to actually be running to use this phrase. In fact, we often use this phrase when we're driving somewhere in our car. We often say we're going for a grocery run, for a beer run, for a food run, whatever it might be that we're picking up from a store. So this phrase, to go for a run for something, you can replace the something for whatever you're going to get, is used when we're running errands. We're going to drive to the store and complete some tasks. A lot of times, if we're just craving a certain food or a drink, we can say we're going to go on a run to go get it. So we're going to go in our car to go for a coffee run. That means you're going to pick up coffee from a restaurant or a small shop. So anytime you hear an American say that they're going to go for a run for something, they're probably not actually running or exercising. They're probably just going out quickly to go get something and bring it back. If you want to say that there is something that is very popular, very well liked, and everyone is talking about it, You can say that everyone is raving about it.
People raved about your burgers.
For instance, everyone I know who has gone to the Taylor Swift concert in the last year has absolutely raved about it. They just say it's so good. They enjoyed the performance so much. They can't stop raving. So when you're raving or raving about something, it means you're talking about it very positively, and it's almost like you can't stop talking about it because you love it so much. If there's a new restaurant in your town or city and everyone is enjoying it so much when they go there, and they'll say, oh, you have to go there, you have to try it, you could say, wow, you're really raving about that restaurant. And another common way we use this word to rave is if someone leaves a very positive review of a restaurant, maybe online or on Google, you might say they left a raving review for the restaurant on Google. If something is very difficult or challenging, you might describe it as an uphill battle.
But it's going to be an uphill battle.
Sometimes, if you have children, you clean your house, you put everything away, and then the kids get home from school and they just kind of mess everything up and get fingerprints all over and take out all the toys. So it is an uphill battle keeping your house clean. It just means it's very challenging, and it feels like no matter how hard you work, the challenge just keeps coming back. Learning English sometimes feels like an uphill battle. No matter how much you study, you might feel like you learned some words in a conversation that you hadn't learned before. And I think everyone feels like it's an uphill battle, even if they're speaking really good English. One thing in life that's very important is that when someone gives you an opinion about something and they're not an expert, make sure to take it with a grain of salt.
It's important to take the future with a grain of salt.
This means that you shouldn't value their opinion a lot because it might not be as important as you think. If you want to tell someone that you're going to share your opinion, but you don't want them to worry about your opinion too much, you're not an expert on the matter, you could say, well, take it with a grain of salt. So what I'm saying, don't place a lot of importance on it. If you want to say, someone is commenting about something in your life, maybe they're saying, you should be doing this in your career, you should go back to school and get another degree, but you don't think they're an expert, you could say, well, I'll take that with a grain of salt, meaning you will place a small amount of importance on it and you won't really listen. Practice what you preach. This is so important, and it's a saying that I say all of the time. I personally like to say lead by example or practice what you preach. This means your actions should be the same as your words or advices. So for instance, maybe your boss is saying it's so important to be on time to work, but your boss is not always on time to work. They do not practice what they preach. So you could say to them, well, you should practice what you preach.
Practice what you preach.
A really strange idiom in English, and I know a lot of different languages have a version of this idiom, is you can't have your cake and eat it too.
You cannot have your cake and eat it too.
So this means you might have conflicting desires in life. Maybe you want to get a promotion at work, but you also want to enjoy your life and take a lot of vacations during the year, so you can't always get your cake and eat it too. This means you can't enjoy a lot of vacations and get a promotion at your work. Hopefully you can enjoy your life, but I know in a lot of jobs, they are wanting you to be very serious, not take a lot of vacation time in order to advance and get a promotion. If you have some negative news to share or something very disappointing to someone who is very excited, you might have to rain on their parade.
Rain on your parade.
Maybe someone is very excited to go to a concert that's at an outdoor venue. You might say, I hate to rain on your parade, but the weather is actually supposed to be very bad, and I think the concert is going to get canceled. So you're sharing some really disappointing news when they are very excited about something. Have you ever acted in the heat of the moment? When we use this phrase in English, we mean that someone is acting very impulsively or very emotionally.
Heat of the moment.
When two people are in the heat of the moment in an argument, it means they're acting so emotionally and they might just say something that is really mean in the heat of a moment. So this means it's a very emotionally charged, passionate moment And sometimes people don't think about what they're saying very much when they are so emotional and so charged up. So we use this phrase to talk about making a decision when we were very emotional. In English, we have a lot of strange idioms that involve our feet. Can you think on your feet? This is a very important skill. If you can think on your feet, it means you can react to things and come up with a plan very quickly without having to think about it for a long time. For instance, maybe you're supposed to have a party or a wedding outside, and again, it starts raining, so you have to think on your feet and come up with another plan. Maybe you need to change where you're going to have the wedding or get a big tent so not everyone gets rained on. If you're giving a presentation and you have a slideshow and your computer isn't working, you might have to think on your feet and just give the presentation without your slides because it's not an option. So thinking on your feet is thinking quickly, making improvisations, and just doing what you need to do without having a lot of planning or preparation. It's important to work hard even when the going gets tough.
When the going gets tough, the tough get going.
We describe a difficult situation as when the going gets tough. And the full phrase or the full idiom for this is when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So this just is a phrase that we use when people need to be tough, hardworking, dedicated, and not give up easily. Oftentimes when people are in a marriage, when the going gets tough, they might get divorced. So you might need to say, when the going gets tough, you need to work through your problems in a marriage and not just get a divorce, because that's becoming so common these days. If you are in a very risky situation or you're very close to being in big trouble, you might be what we describe as on thin ice.
You're on thin ice, Garrison.
If it's wintertime and very cold out, the lakes and the rivers and the ponds, they freeze. And if you're not familiar with this, you can actually walk on the ice usually. But if the ice is not frozen enough and it's very thin, you could fall through and be in great danger in very cold water. So using this as an idiom, we describe a very risky situation as thin ice. If you have been in trouble a lot at work and if you don't meet your next deadline on your project, you'll be on very thin ice with your boss because you might get fired. You're in a risky situation if you don't improve your performance. An interesting way that we caution someone in English is not just be careful, we say easy does it.
Easy does it.
So the other day I was moving a couch with my husband. We were lifting it upstairs and I said easy does it because I didn't want to knock the couch into the wall. So this is just a reminder that you can say to mean just be careful, be delicate, be gentle. If you want to make sure that someone doesn't accidentally hurt themselves by falling, you can say, easy does it, don't fall. The first phrase, you'll have to let me know if you have a phrase that is very similar to this phrase in your native language or your first language. The phrase, let me get ready to demonstrate, is I've had it up to here.
I've had it up to here.
Where is here? What does that mean? Well, this phrase is very common to hear when you are young, speaking English, to hear your mom or your dad say it when they are very irritated or very frustrated. You might hear a teacher say this as well. It's basically just meaning that you have a lot of anger and it's almost like building up in your body. Your frustration is as high as your head. We're just expressing how frustrated or angry we are by saying, I've had it up to here, and usually we say with you or with your behavior. So an adult wouldn't typically say this to another adult, and it's really not even a nice thing to say to children, but it is a common phrase. I've had it up to here with this. You can say this to another person, or you can say it about something like, I've had it up to here with this rain outside. I just want some nice weather so I can go out and go for a walk and enjoy the day. So this just means you're frustrated with how much rain or how much bad weather that you've had. If you had a boss that was very frustrated with you, they might say, I've had it up to here with you being late to work. This just means they're very frustrated. The frustration and anger has built up. If you haven't noticed, whenever English speakers say this phrase, we usually have to have a hand gesture. I've had it up to here. This is an idiom I am so surprised I haven't taught before because it's very common, but it's also very strange. If you're familiar with billiards, for instance, pool, you will know there is an 8 ball in the game. And in English, a very common phrase that we say is, we are behind the 8 ball. This phrase just basically has the meaning of you are in a very difficult situation. In the game of pool, when there is an 8 ball, it is seen as an obstacle because you cannot knock that 8 ball into one of the holes in the pool table because then you will lose. So it's basically we're an obstacle, we're at a disadvantage. We often say the phrase, I'm behind the 8 ball, if we aren't finishing something in time and we're going to be disadvantaged. So for instance, maybe, you have some applications to jobs that are due very soon. They'll be closing the application soon, but if you haven't already done them, if you didn't do it early, you're probably already behind the 8 ball. This means you have a disadvantage. Listen for this English phrase, behind the 8 ball. I think you will be so surprised about how often you're hearing it when English speakers are in daily conversations. This next phrase, I couldn't tell you why we use it, who we're talking about, but again, when English speakers are frustrated, we say this very, very strange phrase. And I think a lot of these strange phrases just come from saying anything when you're frustrated. So the phrase is, for Pete's sakes, or sometimes English speakers will say, oh, for Pete's sakes.
Oh, for Pete's sake.
And this is better than saying a swear word or saying, oh my God, oh my goodness, because that can be seen as offensive to people who are religious. So to avoid using strong language, when we're frustrated, we just tend to say, oh, for Pete's sakes, for Pete's sakes. And it's just a very, very strange phrase, but literally the only reason we use it is just to be not offensive and to just use a phrase when we're frustrated. Let me know what your version of this phrase is in your language if you have another weird name like Pete that you say when you're frustrated. The proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, well, the proof is in the pudding.
Now, if you're not familiar with pudding, it's this sugary, dairy, cold dessert that we eat a lot in the United States. Not a lot, but some people really enjoy it. Chocolate pudding is always very good. It's a bit different than ice cream if you're familiar with pudding. I don't know if you are or not. But this phrase, the proof is in the pudding, all it means is that you have to try something or experience something in order to judge it, in order to say if it's good. So this phrase, apparently the origin is actually a longer sentence to say the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So this means that you have to try a food to know if you actually like it. Why are we using pudding as the example? And why are we saying that there's proof of something in pudding? I don't know. It's one of those really strange ones with no exact origin. But if you want to say that you need to try something, experience something in order to actually make a judgment on it, you can say, well, the proof is in the pudding. Sometimes when there's a lot of work that needs to be done around my house, maybe there's laundry, dishes, vacuuming, other cleaning, I will say to my husband, let's divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer.
This is a really strange phrase. It seems really dramatic, like you're going to conquer a whole country or something. You're going to war. But we use this really just in everyday context to say that we are going to divide up the work. We're going to split it up and try to finish it successfully. So you will even hear this phrase used in a business or professional context. Let's divide and conquer. That means let's break up the work and finish it up. So we use this really dramatic phrase in order to say we're going to finish some work by dividing it. And this phrase comes from the Roman phrase in Latin, divide et impera, which just means that they need to conquer their empire. They need to maintain control. So this is a very dramatic phrase that now has just made it into our everyday English life of saying divide and conquer in order to finish some tasks or business or whatever it may be. Sometimes when someone is talking and they start talking about really small details and they get into all of these different stories and tangents that really have nothing to do with the main subject that you're talking about or the problem that you're trying to figure out. You can describe the way that this person is talking by saying they were getting into the weeds. So this is a really interesting phrase, a really interesting idiom that just literally means that someone is speaking in a lot of details. They're talking about a lot of really small things besides the main point. Sometimes you might need to refocus your group or refocus your coworkers, and you need to start talking about the big problem that you're dealing with or you're trying to solve. You might say to them, let's not get into the weeds of every little problem. Let's focus on the big problem. And we don't know the exact origin of who said this phrase first in English, but we can guess that this phrase comes from the idea that if you get too far into the woods off your main path, it becomes very difficult to walk and keep moving forward. So you don't want to get into the weeds. You want to focus on the main thing. This next phrase in English is pour cold water on something. When you pour cold water on something, you're kind of discouraging someone or something from pursuing an idea. So if you think that you have a great plan, your idea is great, but then your boss comes in and says, well, that will never work. That's a terrible idea. You can say, wow, you really poured cold water on my plan. This is a really common way just to say that they discourage something. Or if someone is a huge fan of something, maybe they really, really like a TV show, and you say, oh, the TV show is terrible. It's made for little kids. I don't know why you like it. They could say, well, you don't have to pour cold water on something that I like. So just being discouraging is what we say, pour cold water on something is what we mean. Another phrase that's really similar to this one that really means the exact same, that's also very strange, is to rain on someone's parade. So we think of someone having a lot of enthusiasm, like fire or like a flame, and when we pour cold water on it, we extinguish it or we get really dismissive about something that they like or something that they want to pursue. Don't shoot yourself in the foot.
Shooting themselves in the foot, let them.
Now, this strange phrase can only come from the idea of someone using a firearm or a gun and being very careless about it and injuring themselves by maybe shooting themselves in the foot. In everyday English, we use this phrase to mean don't do something to harm yourself on accident. Be very careful. Maybe you think you are ready to get a new job and try to make more money, but if you quit your current job before getting a new job, you might be shooting yourself in the foot. So you might be doing something that is not good for you, harming yourself. So we use this idiom in a very figurative context to mean don't do something that's going to harm you or put you at a disadvantage in the end. This next idiom is definitely a sports idiom. It comes from the sport of golf. When someone is going to try to make the golf ball into the golf hole, there is usually a par, or the amount of shots that should be taken in order to get the ball into the hole. And if you are above par, you're not very good because it took you a lot of different shots to get the ball into the hole. And if you're below par, that means you're very good because you did it better than the average person. If you're on par, it means you're exactly as you predicted you should be in golf. The way that we use this phrase on par in everyday life, it means that you're meeting the exact expectations of something. If you're in the office and you're getting a performance review from your boss, they might say you are on par with all of the expectations that I have for you. You're doing really good. So if you're on par, it's usually a very positive thing. It means you're doing very well. You're meeting the expectations that were set for you. Imagine that you are going to pick some lemons or some apples or some pears from a tree. The first fruit that you're going to pick from the tree is the low-hanging fruit because it's the easiest. And that is exactly where this idiom comes from and what it kind of means. So when you're starting something, sometimes you want to start with the low-hanging fruit, which means the easiest tasks or the easiest things in this problem. So when we say that something is low-hanging fruit, it means it's something that's easy to guess, it's easy to achieve, or it's easy to do.
That is some low-hanging fruit.
You don't want to waste your time inventing something that already exists and already works well. And when we have this situation, we use the phrase, don't try to reinvent the wheel.
Because I was too confident and tried to reinvent the wheel.
For instance, I knew someone that is very high up in business and they still write physical to-do lists. And someone asked them, what kind of software, what kind of apps do you use to manage your tasks and to-do list? And she said, well, I just write them down on paper. Don't reinvent the wheel. So this would mean that the old way of doing something is completely efficient. Don't waste time trying to learn something new in order to do just the same thing. And I think this phrase is really useful as well. Speaking of testing out new ideas, if you want to say that you have to actually use an idea or apply a plan in order to see if it works, you can say it's where the rubber meets the road. If you are into cars or automotives, this is a great idiom for you. It's like saying until your tires actually drive on the road, you won't know if your car works. So maybe your team at work has a plan of how you're going to execute something, and you talk about this plan for many days. If you want to say, we don't know if it will actually work until we try it, you can say, well, we'll see where the rubber meets the road. I'm having shoulder surgery on Sunday. That's a mouthful. The first phrase that I'm going to teach you is a mouthful. If something is hard to pronounce, or if it's a lot of words that you have to say together, you can say, oh, that's a mouthful. So I'm having shoulder surgery on Sunday. That is a total mouthful because it's actually very difficult to say. I had to say it slower than normal. A lot of times things have scientific or proper names that are hard to pronounce. And if you try to say it, you could say, oh, that's a mouthful. That means it's very difficult to say. A lot of times, if there is a person that doesn't fit in with a whole entire group of people, we will kind of jokingly say, well, they're the odd man out. And we'll say this even if they're a female or a woman. If you show up to a costume party, Halloween parties here in the United States are super popular. We love Halloween, where we dress up in a costume and everyone is dressed as a superhero. But you see your friend Tim, he's actually dressed up as a fairy tale character. You could say, Tim is the odd man out because he is not dressed like a superhero. Or if everyone in your office shows up wearing a red shirt one day, but your friend Sheila, she's wearing blue to work, you could say, Sheila, you're the odd man out today. You're not wearing red. It's kind of a joking phrase we use to point out that someone is different than the rest of the group. When you want to assure someone that something will happen when the timing is right, you can say it will happen in due time. This is a very common phrase in English as well. So if someone says, I'm really hoping to get engaged, I'm really hoping to get married soon, I'm just hoping that my boyfriend will propose to me, to reassure them that it will happen and it will happen at the right time, you can say in due time. Just be patient. Recently, I said to my son, hey, let's turn off the TV soon. I don't want you to just be glued to the television. This means I don't want you to just be staring at the television, not able to focus on anything else. And my son is very young, so he said, what does it mean to be glued to something? That's what gave me the idea to teach you this idiom today. So when you're very focused on something, especially a screen or a television, and we're watching a television show or a bunch of movies, we will say we are glued to them, and especially if it's very interesting to us. So if there is a Harry Potter movie marathon on TV, that means they show all the Harry Potter movies in a row. I will be glued to the TV. I can't stop watching. The most common way in English we say that we are very frustrated with something and we just want to be done with it, we don't want to deal with the thing or the person anymore, is we say we are at our wit's end. So a lot of times, my sweet old grandmother, she asks me to help her with her computer or her phone. And the other day she said to me she is at her wit's end with dealing with her iPhone, and she just wants to go back to a regular cell phone that's not a smartphone, that doesn't have internet connection, because she just hates dealing with the iPhone and she feels like she always has problems with it. Now, I feel like a lot of old people are at their wit's end when it comes to dealing with technology, because they just don't know how to solve simple problems like younger people do. So they are just so frustrated and at their wit's end. The other day, I said to an English student, hey, I'm short on time. And as I was saying this, I realized that I should teach this idiom to be short on time. So if you want to say that you have very little time available, you can use this very common phrase, I'm short on time. For instance, your friend might call you on the phone and say, hey, do you want to get lunch with me today? And you're actually very busy with work, you won't have time to go out to lunch with someone, you could say, I'm so sorry, I'm actually short on time today. And any native English speaker would understand what you're saying by using this phrase, short on time. Now, the opposite of being short on time is having some spare time. If you want to say that you have some extra time that you can spend on activities, or you can meet up with a friend, for instance, going to lunch during the workday, you can say, I have some spare time. And you might be aware of the question, what do you like to do in your spare time? This means, what do you like to do in the time that you have to spend that's not working, cleaning, or doing things for your family? Your extra time, your leisure time, if you will. So after my work and after taking care of my family in my spare time, I like to watch television or just read a book. This next phrase is a really funny one that we use to say that someone is pretty crazy. Now, you always want to be careful when calling someone crazy because it can come off as offensive. It can be mean to say they're just crazy, but if you want to tell someone, they're crazy for what they're choosing to do, you can say, you are totally off your rocker. So if someone says something and you think that's not true and they say it is true, we could say, well, you're off your rocker. I can't believe you believe that. Or someone could be just doing a very risky or adventurous activity that you would not be brave enough to do. For instance, if someone really likes to skydive, I think they are just off their rocker. I can understand wanting to try it 1 or 2 times, but people who have a hobby of skydiving or jumping out of a plane with a parachute, I think they're just off their rocker crazy because that is just so risky. And personally, I would never want to try skydiving. It just seems way too dangerous. A really casual phrase that you will hear in English conversations, in fact, my husband loves to say it all the time, is when someone says, bear in mind. Bear in mind means the exact same as remember or keep in your mind because it's relevant to this story. So someone might say, hey, do you want to go to a concert with me tonight? You can say, yes, I would love to go with you, but bear in mind traffic is going to be really bad, so we should leave early. So this just means it's a good reminder, or I want you to remember that traffic is bad. So people will use this in their stories that they're telling you to give you a detail about a person or a place that is going to be important to understanding the rest of their story. They want you to bear something in mind. And funny enough about this phrase, the word bear is spelled B-E-A-R, just like the animal. Our next phrase also has the word bear in it, but it is spelled B-A-R-E, which bare as an adjective means empty. So the phrase is with your bare hands. Now, some people, even native English speakers who hear this phrase for the first time, think, why would you use bare hands? Bare hands means empty hands or hands with nothing on them. So if you are afraid of bugs, you might not like to touch spiders with your bare hands. You might like to use a tissue or a napkin to pick up a spider. Or if you are at a restaurant and you see a chef touch something with their bare hands, meaning they don't have a glove on, you might be kind of disgusted because there could be germs on their hands. Or, for instance, you should never touch raw chicken or uncut chicken with your bare hands. When you want to say that someone is very good at noticing small details, or we can say they are observant, you can just say you have a good eye. Or when someone notices something very important or they notice a small error that you might have missed, you can say, oh, good eye. Good eye just means good job observing that or good job noticing that. A really common phrase that you'll hear on the phone in English is to touch base with someone. Now, when you want to say that you're going to quickly check in with someone or just see how things are going, you can say you are going to touch base with them. For instance, you might be talking to someone in your company or at your work you don't frequently talk to, so you'll say, I need to touch base with you next week about this project. And this just means you need to check in or have a quick conversation about the project. If you want to say that you value something very, very much and you don't want to trade it, even if someone offered you something very expensive or a lot of money, you can say that you wouldn't trade it for the world. Now, for instance, you could say that a lot of experiences or people are so important to you that no matter what, you wouldn't trade your time with the person or the time doing the experience for anything. Or you can just say that something that you enjoy is so great that it doesn't matter how much money someone offers you, you wouldn't trade it for the world. For instance, some people enjoy living in the countryside. They think it's just a much simpler life than living in a big city. They might say, I love living in the country so much, I wouldn't trade it for the world. In English television shows or movies, you might have heard a character say another round. Now, another round can mean another round of drinks, so everyone gets served another drink that we call that a round. Or you can say, do you want to play another round? This could be a game like cards, a board game, or frequently we say a round of golf, which means you play 18 holes, a full game of golf. A lot of times when I play cards with people, I like the game so much, I say, let's play another round. I like to play again and again and again. If you've ever heard someone say that they wanted to save face, it means that they want to avoid being embarrassed or showing their embarrassment about something. For instance, if you've ever made a mistake of dressing kind of awkward, or you've had something on your shirt and you kind of make a joke about it, you can say, oh, it looks like I was really messy eating my breakfast this morning. We can say that that's saving face because you might feel pretty embarrassed about it, but you're making a joke to make yourself feel better and less embarrassed about the situation. A phrase that is really funny to use in conversation when you have just way too much food, or maybe you went to the store and you accidentally bought too much, you can say, I have enough to feed an army. If you've ever been to a price savings club in the United States, like Sam's Club or Costco, where you buy everything in big sizes in order to save money, sometimes if you buy too much there, or you just think you're getting a good deal, you buy so much, you could bring it home, and you think, how am I ever going to eat this? Or how is my family ever going to eat this? You can say that you bought enough to feed an army. Or if you go to a party and you say, wow, you guys have so much food, you have enough to feed an army. This is just a joking phrase to say that you have just so much food. It's crazy. An interesting phrase in English that is added into conversation a lot is the phrase needless to say. Now, you would think that this phrase, needless to say, means that you don't have to say anything, but this is actually used to emphasize something. So you could say, in college, I had a 4.0 GPA. This means you had perfect grades in every single class. You could say, I had a 4.0 GPA. Needless to say, I spent lots of hours studying. So in theory, you wouldn't have to say that you had to study a lot because people could assume that from the first part of your sentence that you had perfect grades. But you wanted to emphasize, it's needless to say I spent hours studying. A good phrase that means that you had very little difficulty with something is to say that you cruised through it. For instance, in high school, I was very good at language arts or, English sort of classes. I was not as good with math, but really good at English, hence why I'm an English teacher now. And whenever we had books assigned to us for reading, I would just cruise through the book because I really enjoyed reading books and I had an easy time finishing books quickly. When you go on a cruise ship or a cruise boat, it's usually a very enjoyable time. When we say that someone is cruising through something, it means they're having an easy, enjoyable time with it. One casual way to say that you're going to spend the night at somebody else's house is to say that you were going to crash there. Sometimes in English we say, oh, I just had to crash early last night. That means I had to go to bed or go to sleep early. So often after a night out, Especially if you go to the bars and you're drinking, you might sleep at a friend's house. You might sleep on their couch and you might say, I'm going to crash on your couch tonight. That means I'm going to spend the night here. Or if you want to offer to someone to stay at your house, you can say, you can crash here tonight, or you can crash here for a few days even. An interesting way in English that we say that two people are going to break up in a relationship, or you're just going to end something, you can say that you are going to call it quits. You could even use this phrase in a casual conversation at work. Your boss might say, okay, everybody's tired. Let's call it quits for the day and go home. Or let's call it quits for the week and go home. If two people are in a relationship, they're boyfriend, girlfriend, and they're having a lot of arguments, they might just call it quits. This means they might break up and end the relationship. In English, you might hear the phrase, never back down. When you're in a fight or a confrontation or an argument and one person just says, fine, you're right, okay, whatever, you can do it, they are backing down. If you tell someone, I'm not going to back down, this means you're not going to give up in the argument and you're going to try to get your way, or you're going to try to persuade them to do something. On a roll. When you hear an English speaker say that they are on a roll, it means they're experiencing a lot of success. A lot of success consecutively, they are on a roll. It's like their success just keeps going and going. After winning 3 games in a row, the team felt like they were on a roll. Linda got 3 promotions at work, and now she feels like she's on a roll in her career. Ever since James started his diet, he's been losing weight every week, and he's on a roll. Once you learn all of these English idioms, you'll feel like you're on a roll with your English. Now, let's move on to the next phrase. Second nature. This is definitely an English phrase that's used all of the time. You might have a phrase very similar to it in your first language. If something is second nature, it means it comes so naturally or easily to you. It's like a habit. It's almost like breathing, but not quite, of course. So breathing, eating, sleeping, those things would be first nature. But let's say you're really good at your job. It comes very easily to you. You're one of the best people in your work position. You could say, my work is like second nature to me. After years of playing music, the piano is just second nature to some people. Driving a car is second nature to most adults. My husband is so good at math, it's like second nature to him.
Successful cover becomes almost second nature.
A really funny thing that American English speakers will say if someone is correct or they got a really difficult answer and you think they're right, you can say bingo. Now, normally we play the game of bingo, which is where there is a number and a letter called out and you try to get 5 in a row on your bingo card. Maybe you've played the game before. And when you get the 5 in a row, you win the game, you say bingo. Now, if you want to tell someone that they are exactly correct and they're answering kind of a difficult question or a question that you didn't think they could exactly answer and you're excited, you can yell bingo. Or someone might yell bingo at you when you get the right answer. When you lose your wallet, your keys, or your phone, you may search your house for hours. And when you finally find it, you could yell bingo, because you are just so excited and you finally found the correct place where it was. When something is broken, maybe you can't fix your computer and you finally find a solution, you might yell out, bingo, finally. So it's just a very excited exclamation expression that we use quite often in English.
Oh, bingo, bingo.
When you want to say that you are going to be strong in your decision, you're not going to change your mind, you made a decision, you made a choice, and you're going to support that choice continually, you can say you are going to stand by it. When you stand by something, you support it. So you can stand by a person or you can stand by a decision that you've made. Years ago, I decided to start my own English teaching business, and I have stood by my decision. I haven't given up. I haven't changed careers because I love doing this. It's important to stand by your friends when they're going through difficult times because they need your support. You need to support your friends. You need to stand by them.
I stand by my decision.
A really great idiom that's related to sports is to shoot your shot. Maybe you've heard the famous Michael Jordan quote, "You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take." It goes just like that. This quote means if you don't actually try or attempt to do something, of course, you're not going to be able to do it. So trying is better than not trying. Or shooting your shot is better than not shooting your shot. So we use this phrase to shoot your shot really informally when you're either trying to ask someone on a date romantically. You could say, I'm going to shoot my shot. I'm going to ask her out to dinner. Or you can do it in a way where you're advancing your career. I'm going to apply for that job. I'm going to shoot my shot. It just means you are going to try, even though it's kind of a long shot, which is another phrase that means it's not likely to happen or it might not be for sure going to happen. So sometimes in life, in order to achieve your goals, you have to shoot your shot.
Emma, shoot your best shot.
When you want to say that someone's going to resist or oppose something, you can say they're going to give pushback. So sometimes at work, when someone proposes a new strategy or they present a project and you just don't think it's going to work, you can say, I have to push back on you a little bit. Or you can say, I'm going to give you pushback. That means you're going to give opposition or the opposite opinion of what they have. If you've ever heard an English speaker say that somebody has baby fever, it doesn't mean they're sick. It doesn't mean their baby is sick. It just means that they have a really strong desire to start their family. Oftentimes when there's a really cute baby and there is a woman who is maybe married, or, you just think they're in a position in their life where they might want to start their family, you could say, is this baby giving you baby fever because they're so cute? So it's just kind of a fun way that we say that somebody wants to have a baby because they think babies are cute and they are just getting older into that stage in their life.
You want babies. You have baby fever.
Instead of saying that we are going to give a donation or we're going to volunteer some time, in English, sometimes we will say instead, we are going to give back. So you might work for a company that likes to give to charities. They like to donate money, or they have their employees work volunteer jobs for one day out of the year. So you could say, my company really likes to give back to charity, or my company likes to give back to the community. Many people believe it's important to give back in life. This means either to give your money to people who need it more, or to give your time as a volunteer. One phrase that's really important to know in the workplace is if somebody tells you to get after something, it means you should pursue it and you should start working hard. So this is quite an informal phrase, but it's used quite frequently. We could say, he woke up very early in the morning to get after it in the gym. That means to go work hard and exercise in the gym. The team needed to get after it in order to meet their project deadline. That means the team or the group of people at work need to start working hard or they're not going to finish the project by the deadline or the time that they need it. And when I have a to-do list, I always tell myself, all right, let's just get after this to-do list. Let's just get it done. That means I need to start working hard and not procrastinate when I have a long to-do list. Do you have this same problem when you have a lot of things to do?
Let's get after it! Come on, let's get after it!
I love that dress. It's so you. Okay, this phrase, it's so you. It's a really weird English phrase that we use to say that something matches someone's personality or it matches the way they look and it matches very well. Maybe your friend is one of those people that likes to dress like a rock star. So you see something black and sparkly and you say, oh, it's so you. That means this piece of clothing, it matches the way that you usually dress very well. Maybe you have a friend that is very good at remembering things like birthdays and anniversaries, and they get you a gift for your birthday and you say, oh, it's so you to remember my birthday. This just means that you are really good at remembering things like birthdays. It's so you. So that would be a compliment to give in this situation.
So you.
Is it?
In many movies, at the very end, the characters will ride off into the sunset. This means that everything that happened in the movie is over, everything is good now, everything is triumphant. That means the heroes of the movie have won whatever fight or adventure they were on. We use this phrase to ride off into the sunset in this case. So at the end of almost all the Marvel movies, the heroes just ride off into the sunset. That means they have defeated the villains and they win the battle, and our movie just ends with them being happy. So this phrase is used a lot with television, movies, and books. Maybe you think about the day that you can retire from your work or you can sell your business. You might say to yourself, I can't wait to the day where I retire and I can ride off into the sunset. That means my life will just be easy and good, and it's like you won your life at that point.
You, me, riding off into the sunset.
This next phrase, to batten down the hatches, it can be used literally or in a more idiomatic, not literal way. Let's talk about it literally first. If there's a storm coming, you're going to want to batten down the hatches. That means you want to make sure everything is secured so it will not blow away in the storm, whether it's a hurricane or a tornado or just a bad thunderstorm. So it just means you're preparing for a challenging storm and you're protecting everything that you own or in your house. Now let's talk about it, how people use it in a less literal, more idiomatic way. So you might be thinking to yourself, I have a lot of work coming up. I have a lot of different projects that I'm going to have to do at one time. I'm going to be so busy. I'm going to have to batten down the hatches. This just means instead of scheduling lots of social outings and things to do outside of work, you're going to have to be very focused. You're going to have to go to bed early, wake up early, get to work on time. You're going to have to batten down the hatches. So take your work very seriously. A phrase that I use all of the time when I'm talking about cleaning, especially, is the phrase from top to bottom. So when you say you're going to clean the house from top to bottom, you are just saying you are going to be very thorough. It's like you're starting at the very top of your ceiling and cleaning all the way down to the floor and everything in between. You won't miss anything. So whenever I'm going to have company or guests over to my house, I tend to clean the house from top to bottom. You can also use this phrase if you are going to inspect something very closely. So before you buy a wedding ring, a very expensive diamond, you should examine it from top to bottom to make sure there is no damage to it. Or you could say that a company needs to restructure from top to bottom because things are just not going very well. So that means instead of just fixing one part of the company, you are going to be very thorough and look at the entire company.
Real from top to bottom.
And when we're talking about people, you can use this next phrase, from head to toe. So when you want to say that something is covering you completely, like mud, you could say, I have mud from head to toe. That means all over my body. I'm very dirty. And this doesn't have to be very literal, but for the most part, if you're using this phrase, it means you are completely filthy. I'm dirty from head to toe. Or if you have a rash on your body and it's pretty much all over your body, you can say, I am itchy from head to toe. So we use this phrase just to mean all over our bodies. When someone says it's common sense, this means that there is a concept that should be very easily understood by anyone, no matter how smart they are. It's common sense. When you want to tell someone that something should be very obvious to them, or someone says this to you, be careful because it can come off a little bit rude or snarky to say it's common sense. So you might say it's common sense to wear a seatbelt. This means to everyone it should be so obvious that you should wear a seatbelt in the car because it makes you safe if you get into an accident. Or you could say it's just common sense to carry an umbrella in case it's going to rain. Or it's common sense that you should try to save money. When you say that someone has slipped up, to slip up means to make an error. So this is a really common slang phrase that we use in English. Oftentimes you might hear someone say, whoops, I slipped up. I shouldn't have told you that. That means they told you a secret or a piece of information that they were not supposed to share with you or anyone else. Maybe you have to give a presentation in your work and you feel a lot of pressure. You're going to hope that you're not going to slip up during your presentation. That means make any unintentional errors. So this is just a really common casual way that we say that someone has made an unintentional error. They have slipped up. I'm wondering if this next phrase is the same in your language. If you want to say that someone is annoying you a ton, you can say they are driving you crazy. So right now there was lawnmowers outside of my house and it was driving me crazy because every time I turned on my camera, I would hear another lawnmower. If you've ever had a roommate that doesn't clean their own dishes, they may have drove you crazy. That means it annoyed you so much. So just annoying behavior or annoying noises that make us very frustrated, we can say they're just driving us crazy. And this is a very common phrase in the United States as well. Whenever you want to visit someone's house, not because you were planning on it, but because you are close by and you think it's just a convenient time to stop, you might say, hey, I'm going to stop by because I'm in the neighborhood. Or maybe you don't even call or text them before you go to their house. You might knock on their door and they're like, what are you doing here? You can say, I'm just stopping by. I was in the neighborhood. So this phrase, even if it's not literally their neighborhood, it's just their area that they live in, is just used to explain why you would casually stop at someone's house just because it's convenient. And it's a really common way to explain this in English. If you want to tell your friend that they should stop by if they're ever close to your house, you can say, hey, stop by if you're ever in the neighborhood. If you are competitive, this next idiom is important to know. If you want to say that you are beating someone in a competition or a race very badly, you can say you are leaving them in the dust. If you've ever seen the American game show Jeopardy, when one contestant is answering all the questions correctly, they will win more money than the other contestants. And if they get enough correct, they'll leave the other contestants in the dust. This just means that they are beating them very badly. The other contestants don't really have a chance to catch up to them. In life, it's really important to face your problems head on. This means you should face your problems or deal with your problems without any hesitation. So when we say solve or deal with our problems, we can use this phrase, face our problems. And then if we want to say we're going to face them directly, we're going to deal with them directly without hesitation or procrastination, we can say we're going to do it head on. When you were a child, maybe you were afraid of the dark, and in order to face your problems head on, maybe you just turned off the lights and just said, I can do it, I can be brave. You're facing your problems head on. Or if you have a problem with another person, maybe you've had an argument or you thought they had said something about you that was bad to another person, you can say, you know what, I'm just going to face her head on. That means I'm going to talk to her directly to figure out what the problem is. The opposite of facing your problems head on would be asking another person to solve your problem or figure it out for you. If you are not going to deal with a problem or deal with a person that's bothering you, or if they say something mean, you're not going to say anything to them, you can say, I'm just going to shrug it off. That means instead of having confrontation, you are just going to shrug. You're not going to say anything. Sometimes when you get negative feedback, if the person who is giving the feedback is not very intelligent, you can say, well, I'll just shrug it off for now. That means you're not going to listen to them. You don't find it important. You're not going to worry about it. You'll just shrug it off. Another way we can use this phrase to slip away is we can talk about time passing. And if you want to say that it feels like time is passing quickly, you can say it feels like time is just slipping away from me. It's like you're trying to grab the time and the memories, but things are just slipping away. You don't have enough time to finish what you want to do or do all the things that you want to do. Oftentimes in the summer, it feels like time is slipping away and soon it will be winter soon. And finally, this phrase to slip away, we can talk about someone dying peacefully when they slip away. So this is used more rarely, but it can be used especially in literature, in books, and in movies. We can say they slipped away. This means they died. Don't go there. When you want to tell someone that they should not talk about a topic because it's either kind of sensitive or offensive to someone. When they start talking about it, you could say, oh, don't go there. That means don't start talking about that topic because it's sensitive. Maybe your family does not like to discuss politics because in the past, you guys have had opposing views and there's been a big argument. And maybe you have someone bring up something political at dinner. You can say, oh, don't go there. We don't want to have a big argument again. Let's call it. When you want to say that it's the end and you can be finished with something, you can say, let's call it. So maybe you are having an argument with someone and you just think that nobody's ever going to win the argument. The other person is never going to agree with you. You can say, well, there's no use in fighting about it. Let's just call it. This just means let's end the argument. You can use this at work when you want to finish working on something. You can say, all right, let's just call it for now. This means let's be done with it. Let's call it the end. We can also use this phrase at night when we're ready to go to bed. We can say, let's call it a night. And then when we're at work and we're ready to go home, we say, let's call it a day. So when I teach you these English expressions, you might wonder who actually made up these phrases. Or if you know this expression, you might say, who coined these phrases? So when we say that someone has coined a phrase, it means they invented the phrase or the expression in the language. So William Shakespeare is often credited with coining many phrases that we still use today in English. This means he invented these phrases. People weren't saying these things before. So oftentimes there's a lot of rappers or singers that make up phrases for their songs and they kind of coin the phrases from their songs. If you ever watched the show Jersey Shore, it's quite old now. It was on MTV. It's about people who live in New Jersey, which is kind of its own place in the United States. They liked to go to the gym, they liked to go tan, and then they would go do their laundry. So when they were going to do these things, they'd say GTL, and they coined the phrase GTL, and it was quite popular when the show was on TV. People would say GTL, gym, tan, laundry. When you say to someone, out with it, it's a command that we use really casually in our conversations to say like, come on, say the secret or say whatever you want to say. We especially use this phrase when we feel like someone maybe just is kind of embarrassed or nervous to talk to us about a certain topic. So maybe your friend seems really anxious and worried and you're like, what's wrong? And they just don't say anything. And you're a little bit frustrated, you might say, out with it. What's bothering you? This means just tell me now. Don't worry about what I'm going to think. Just tell me. And another informal phrase that means this exact same thing is spit it out. So if you want someone to just say what they mean, you don't want them to worry about offending you, or you don't want them to worry about what you'll think. You just want to hear what they're thinking. You can say, just spit it out. And this doesn't mean, obviously, to spit. It just means talk. Say what you want to say. Spit it out. First, you should say, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay? Yes or no. If they can't hear you okay, they might not be able to answer, obviously. Another very common phrase you'll definitely hear on the phone if the person can't hear you very well in English is you're breaking up. This means your voice is breaking up. I can't hear it all the way. Or if you want to tell someone that you can't hear them very well, maybe you can only hear every other word, you can say you're breaking up. If you want to warn someone that your phone call might not be very stable because, you know, you're in a very remote area, you're in the country, or maybe you're somewhere where there's not very good cell phone coverage, we commonly say, sorry, I have bad service. I might break up a little, or you could say, I have bad service. Let me know if you can't hear me. And this just means you have bad cell phone service. When I'm on the phone with someone and they're traveling, especially, you know, if they're staying in a hotel, oftentimes they'll be talking on the phone. I will start to not be able to hear them. They'll say, I'm in an elevator. I'm in an elevator. Oftentimes, you know, when you're inside of an elevator, the cell phone is not able to reach the cell phone towers and get good service. So this is another good warning that you'll want to know when you're speaking English on the phone. If you can't hear someone, you know, very well, or maybe you just didn't quite understand every single word that they said. On the phone, we often say, "Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that?" And another common phrase that goes right along with "can you repeat that" is, "Sorry, I didn't catch that." That means I didn't hear it completely or I didn't quite understand it. And it tells the person that you're talking to that you need them to repeat it. Here are some great phrases that you will commonly hear at the beginning of a phone call in English. Whether you're speaking to a familiar friend or relative, these phrases are pretty casual and you can always use them at the beginning of your phone call. When my family calls one another, we always say, "Hey, what's going on?" That means, what's the reason that you called? It's a really common way to start the phone call. What's going on? And sometimes I'll call someone and I will say, "Hey, what's going on?" Or someone will call me and say, "Hey, what's going on?" That usually just means that you want to hear what they're doing with their day. You want to hear how they're feeling, how their family is. It's just a very general way to start a casual conversation on the phone. The most common way that I answer the question, "What's going on?" when I'm not doing a lot or I don't have a lot of time to talk on the phone, is I'll just say, "Nothing much. What's up with you?" This just means, how are you? But what's the reason that you're calling as well? This is a good way in a casual phone call just to get to the point of the conversation. When you call someone like your mother or your grandmother or your dad or your grandfather, oftentimes, you don't have a very specific reason that you're calling. You're just calling to be nice and you want to make sure that they're healthy, they're happy, they don't need anything. There are 3 ways that you can say this on the phone in English. You can say, "I'm just calling to catch up." To catch up with someone means just to talk about your life and how you've been recently, how they've been recently, again, talking about their health or their kids or whatever. It's just a very general, casual conversation. Sometimes I just say, "I'm just calling to check in." When you check in with someone, again, it's just making sure that everything is okay. Or I'm just telling you that, everything is going well with me. Just going over what's going on that day. And another phrase that you can use to just make sure that you're giving a nice, kind phone call with, no true reason is, "I'm just calling to check up on you." If you check up on someone, you make sure that they're doing okay. So these 3 phrases are all very good to use just for calling someone casually to make sure that they are doing well. 2 phrases that can really help you start the conversation on the phone, especially maybe if you don't know the person that well or you don't normally talk on the phone, you might feel a little nervous, is you can say, "What have you been up to lately?" I think this is a really nice phrase because, it makes you sound interested in what they've been doing. And it makes it so you sound like you're a friend, "What have you been up to lately? I want to know how you've been doing." Or you can even say, "What's new?" And this phrase is really useful on the phone, or it's useful in person in a conversation as well. Just to say, "Hey, what's new?" This just means, what's been going on in your life. Usually you're asking for positive news, but sometimes people will say, "Oh, I've had someone sick in my family," or they'll tell you something unfortunate or bad that has happened. These are 2 really friendly, polite ways to start the conversation on the phone. Another reason that people call you is maybe they'll say, "I've got a favor to ask," or "I've got a favor." People will say, "I've got a favor to ask," just, to be polite, to warn you that they're going to ask you for something, but this is considered very polite way to ask for a favor. "I've got a favor to ask." And you say, "Shoot." Shoot means go ahead. Or you can respond with the phrase, "I'm all ears." My English students notice that Americans love to say totally as well. Totally just means for sure, yes, of course. So these phrases, shoot, "I'm all ears," or totally just means you're enthusiastically saying, "Yes, go ahead, tell me the favor, I'm happy to help." They're very polite in a casual, friendly conversation. One of the most common reasons for calling someone on the phone has to be to make plans. So here are some great phrases that you will need to know if you're calling someone to make plans or someone calls you to try to, make plans. So again, just like the beginning of our conversation, sometimes we say, "Hey, what are you up to?" Or "What are you up to right now?" These phrases are just inquiring if you are busy or not. It might sound more like a general greeting, but when people say, hey, what are you up to on the phone? It's trying to figure out if you're busy or not. Another question, if someone is making plans with you on the phone, maybe they want to go to the movies, to a restaurant, or maybe they just, want to come over to your house, you can ask them, what time did you have in mind? That means what time works best for you, or what time were you planning on? It's a great way that people ask, what time works? What time were you thinking of? Sometimes people won't just say, what time did you have in mind? People will say, hey, what time were you thinking? And this means the exact same thing, like what time works, what time did you plan on? Another phrase that's very important for making plans and talking about the time is, when do you want to meet up? Whether you're meeting at someone's house, a restaurant, or going to a park, you want to know, what time do you want to be there to see me? What time do you want to meet up? And a really, really common question that you will hear in the United States is, your place or mine? Now, make sure if you say this, you're not being too assumptive that the person would allow you to come over or the person would want to come to your house. You typically want to know someone pretty well before you go to where they live, but you'll just hear this question when making plans. If you guys are planning on going to someone's house, you could say, hey, your place or mine? Someone could say, do you want to have dinner with me on Tuesday? And if you want to offer, you could come to my place or I could come to yours. You could say, oh yeah, your place or mine? I would consider this question very polite because you are also offering to have the person to your house and not just assuming that they are inviting you over. Or if you have a good friend that you hang out with quite frequently and they say, hey, we should hang out this weekend. You could say, yeah, your place or mine? So it's just a very common way to make plans with this phrase. So especially if you're planning a date or you're planning on hanging out with someone for the first time, it can be kind of, awkward at first, like, oh, I don't know exactly what place you're talking about, or I don't know your home address. So here are some questions that can help you figure out where you should meet the person that you're making plans with. You can say, could you tell me the address? And this can be used in a formal or informal casual conversation. Sometimes I just say, can you text me the details? Because I don't have a paper and pen and it's hard on the phone to, write it down real quick. But everybody texts nowadays, so I just say, hey, text me the details. So this just means, text me where we're meeting, when we're meeting, whatever I need to know. Or the other day I went to a comedy show with my husband and my brother and my sister-in-law, and my brother had this all planned out and he just said, I'll send you the details. So he sent me, on a text message where I needed to be, when I needed to be, what restaurant we were going to meet at. It was super fun and it was so nice because he said, I'll just send you the details. That means don't worry about, where we're going or trying to find it. I'll text it to you. You don't have to write anything down. So the details would just be the location and the time for the most part. So many places in the United States, we don't have buses or subways or trains, It's very common to drive somewhere. There's so many cars and everyone has to drive in the United States. So a very common question you'll hear if you're making plans on the phone is, do you want me to pick you up? This means you want me to drive to your house to come get you and give you a ride. It's a really polite way, to offer to drive. Or if you want to make sure that the person has a car and you're unsure if they do, you could say, hey, how are you getting there? And they might say, I'm driving, or actually, I do need a ride. If you're going to a party and you get kind of nervous and awkward, like myself, you may want to know who's going to be there. So if somebody invites you to go to a dinner or whatever it is, you can say, hey, who's going to be there? This just means tell me all the people because I need to make sure that I know them. Or maybe you don't want a certain person to be there if you're going to go. So this is a very important question as well. I am one of those people that is always hungry. I'm always thinking about what's for dinner. And if I'm making plans with someone on the phone, I always say, have you eaten yet? That means, are you hungry? Basically, it's a very polite way to ask, like, do you want to go get some food? Hey, have you eaten yet? And maybe you're going to meet up with them in a little and they say, no, I actually haven't eaten. And say, oh, well, let's go get some food. Or you can use this phrase, let's grab a bite. The phrase, let's grab a bite, is just a slang phrase that means let's go to a restaurant and let's get food together. And typically we say a bite, this phrase, when we're going to just a very casual restaurant. You wouldn't be going to a fancy dinner and be like, we are going to grab a bite tonight. No, this phrase is strictly casual. Let's grab a bite. Here in the United States, at least in big cities, there are so many options for restaurants because the United States truly is a melting pot, and there's a lot of different immigrant communities here that bring different types of food here. And so you might ask someone, what do you think about Chinese? Or what do you think about Vietnamese? Or what do you think about Mexican? Now, this might sound a little strange, but when you ask this question, you're typically talking about food. Like, what do you think about these types of food? Would you be interested in going to eat these types of food with me? So if someone says, what do you think about Mexican? They're not talking about what do you think about Mexican people? They're talking about what do you think about Mexican food? Because people have different preferences, and you might be asking, like, do you want to go get it with me? And again, if you're trying to be polite and you're trying to make sure that the person has a way to get to where you are going, you can say, do you need a ride? This means that you're driving, or, someone you're with is driving, and you can pick them up. Or you can say, hey, I'll drive. It's just a friendly way to say, I can drive my car. This question is probably more common amongst females, but men can ask this too because it's important that you fit in where you're going. And, if you're supposed to dress fancy or casual, you should say, what should I wear? And the person might answer, oh, sorry, this restaurant is really fancy. Definitely wear something nice. Or what should I wear? Oh, you can just wear jeans. It's not that fancy. Here are my favorite 3 phrases for, ending the phone call, just being happy about the plans. I'll say, well, it's a plan. This just means like, yep, we've got it ready to go. I'll see you then. Or you can say, it's a date. You can even say this to just your friend. It doesn't have to be an actual romantic date that you're going on with a girlfriend or a boyfriend. I will say this all the time to my friend when we make plans. Oh, it's a date. That just means it's a solid plan. It's exciting as a date. Or you can just say, I can't wait. This just means you're excited. The plan is ready. I'll see you then. Now that we have reviewed some phrases that will help you make plans with a friend in a more casual phone call, these phrases will help you when you're on the phone with someone making an appointment. You could be making a doctor's appointment, dentist appointment, an appointment to go see, a professional lawyer or accountant, whoever you need to make an appointment with. The conversation is going to be more formal, definitely if you're calling a business. So let's review these phrases. So I'm definitely one of those people who, gets a little nervous to call and make an appointment. So I always like to think about when they answer what I'm going to say. And if English isn't your first language, it can also be a little nerve-wracking. It can make you nervous to call and make an appointment. So always just get in your mind what you're going to say when they answer. So you might call and they answer the phone like, hi, how can I help you? And you can say, I need to make an appointment. Or I sometimes say, hi, I'm calling to schedule an appointment. This is a really common way to say, I just need to schedule an appointment. I'm calling to schedule an appointment. Remember that phrase so that when someone answers the phone, you are ready to speak and schedule that appointment. Now, if someone answers the phone and, they say, okay, when do you want the appointment? They'll actually just say, hey, what times work best for you? And this is just like asking you, does morning, afternoon, whatever work best for you? Give them a time range because it can be so hard to find a time to schedule an appointment, especially if it's a doctor's appointment. I find it really hard to find a time that works for my schedule. A phrase that also is really common is, okay, when are you free? Or when are they free? This is asking when their schedule is available. Sometimes if there are very limited appointments, whoever you're calling might just say, okay, how about Tuesday at 1:30? Does that work with your schedule? So this question just means, is it going to fit into your schedule? Are you going to be available then? Does that work with your schedule? A really common phrase in business English is, I can pencil you in. If you pencil in someone, it means that there's not a lot of time for an appointment or a meeting, but they will be able to fit you in. On the telephone with a business or a doctor's office, they'll ask you to confirm information. So they'll say, can you confirm your date of birth? They're asking for your birthday. It's a really, really formal way to ask for this. Or they'll say, can you confirm your current address? This means, can you tell me where you live? Now, you can also use this question as well. I always do this on the phone because I am the worst at writing down information correctly. I'll say, can you confirm the appointment time again? So they'll say, yes, it's at Tuesday at 1:30, and I'll make sure that I have it correctly. Or I'll say, hey, just to confirm the appointment's on Tuesday at 1:30, and they'll say, yes, that's correct. Or, sorry, no, I said Wednesday, and I'll be like, if someone gives you an appointment time and it doesn't work, you can say, do you have anything available the next week? Or do you have anything available on a Friday? Do you have anything available on? So you're asking for a specific day, or if you're asking for a specific month, you could say, do you have anything available in February, in January, whatever it is. And then if somebody has a time for you that doesn't quite work, you can say, do you have anything available earlier? Or do you have anything available later? And again, if you're like me and you just want to make sure that you have the correct information, you can say, I just want to clarify the time or the date. Or if you have an appointment and you're calling an office or business and you want to make sure that you have the correct time and date, you can just call them and say that, hey, I just want to confirm the time and date of my appointment. So now that we've talked about all these ways that you'll be speaking on the phone to people and really common phrases, let's talk about how you're going to end the phone call without being awkward. A great phrase that works either in a formal or informal conversation is to say, okay, take care. This is a very kind salutation, a way to say goodbye in a phone call. Hey, take care. If you are in an informal, casual conversation with a friend, you will say, have a good one. Have a good one is a really common phrase on the phone and in real life conversation to say, have a good day. Now, if you're in a formal conversation, like scheduling an appointment on the phone, you'll want to say, have a good day or have a great day. Both are totally acceptable and very friendly. And if you're in the South of the United States, a really common phrase is to say, have a blessed day. You know, it always kind of makes me laugh because I'm not from the South when someone says that to me on the phone, just because I'm not used to it. Have a blessed day. Another way if someone has helped you on the phone is you end the conversation with saying, thanks again, I'll talk to you soon. Thanks again is just another way to express your gratitude, just to say that this conversation on the phone was helpful. Thanks again. In a formal conversation on the phone, someone might say to you, thanks for calling. Or you could say thanks for calling to someone as well. And the last three phrases I have for you are more for your casual, friendly conversations. A really cool way to say goodbye is to say, hey, take it easy. Take it easy just means, have a good day, relax, take it easy. Take it easy literally means don't work too hard. But it's just used all the time in casual conversation to be friendly. I just think it's a very cool way to say goodbye. Take it easy. Or if you just made plans with someone and you're going to see them that day, or just maybe very nearby in the future, you can say talk to you soon or see you soon if you're actually going to see them. And if you're talking to someone that you don't talk to a lot, you can say, all right, keep in touch. This just means call me back again. I enjoyed talking to you. Keep in touch. When you are new to a neighborhood, hopefully you have some friendly neighbors. And if you do, they'll definitely say, welcome to the neighborhood.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
This is the most kind and polite way to welcome someone, to start a conversation even. Or if you're just walking by real quick, maybe you'll hear them say that. Or if you notice that you have a new neighbor in your neighborhood, or if you live in an apartment building, you could say, welcome to the building. And this is just, again, really kind, cordial, and polite. The next question that I get asked all the time by all my new neighbors, I live in a really, really friendly neighborhood. I've never talked to my neighbors as much as I do now. Some people, when they move to the United States, they notice that neighbors don't tend to talk a lot. In other countries, you will have meals with your neighbors, you will hang out with your neighbors, and, You will know their families pretty well, but sometimes people are a bit more closed off in the United States. This is not true when it comes to my new neighborhood. Everyone is friends, a lot of people talk, so I've had to really be extremely social, and sometimes I'm a bit more introverted. I like to just be by myself, but I've kind of broken out of my shell, broken out of my bubble, because I've noticed that my new neighborhood is very social, very welcoming. So I'm becoming a very social person as well. And when people are greeting you in your new neighborhood, or if you're greeting someone, they'll often ask you, where did you move from? Or where did you come from?
Where'd you move from?
Where did your family move from? This is just, asking where did you live prior to moving here? And I often meet people that are from outside the United States. So I ask them, where did you move from? And sometimes they'll tell me, if they've lived here for a while, they'll say, oh, I moved from a different state or a different city, but my family is originally from India, or my family is originally from Pakistan, or wherever it might be. If you are not originally from the United States, which many of you are not watching this video, it's awesome to spark up a conversation about your family, your culture, and your origins. Where are you from? Where did you move from? Okay, so we've gone over welcoming someone to the new neighborhood. Here's another very common question that you will hear when you move to a new neighborhood. What do you do for a living?
What do you do for a living?
I'm sure you've heard this question before, but it's of course just such a common question, such a common conversation topic. What is your job, or what is your career? So you can ask this to someone else, or you might be asked this yourself. And along with that question, a lot of people will now ask, do you work from home or do you have to go into the office? Just after COVID, the culture in the United States has changed so much that a lot of people who have office jobs don't tend to work in an office every day. So some people will say, oh, I work from home half the time and I go into the office sometimes. Or they'll say, I'm hybrid. If you say you're hybrid, it means that you work from home and you go to an office. Another question that goes along with this that you need to know is someone might ask you, do you commute? It means, do you have to drive or do you have to travel to work? Oftentimes in the United States, people commute or travel to work by car. So you could say, I have to commute 45 minutes to work. This would be a pretty long drive, but pretty average in a big city. Or you can say, actually, no, I take the bus or I walk to work. Or if you don't commute, you can say, no, I work from home. So typically, if people ask you if you commute to work, this just means you work a long distance from here. Do you have to drive far to get to your job? Two common questions that you could ask, or you could be asked when it comes to talking to your neighbors, is you could say, what do you do for fun around here? What is there to do around here?
What do you do for fun around here?
And this is just asking if there's good parks, good restaurants, good places to meet up, maybe even a nice library. What do you do for fun around here? What activities are available in our community? And then I specifically ask, or I get asked, if people are asking me, do you have any restaurant recommendations? This is asking if there's any good food in the area that you would recommend that someone would try or someone would recommend to you. Do you have any restaurant recommendations? So now that you've probably met your neighbors, this next section of the video is going to be very useful. It's going to be having small talk with your neighbor. And that's the most common conversation that you will probably have with your neighbor when you walk out your door and you happen to see them for just a couple minutes. You might want to have a short chat with them just to stay friendly, at least say hi to them. But I always try to have just a short conversation just so I can stay friendly with them in case there ever is a problem. At least we have something that we've talked about before. So one thing you could say is, hey neighbor, how's it going?
Hey neighbor, how's it going?
This is a really general greeting. And of course, if you don't remember your neighbor's name, this might work out okay for you because you're just calling them neighbor, and hopefully you try to figure out their name pretty quickly. Hey neighbor, how's it going? One thing about me is years ago, I said I was really good with names, and I really wish I was still good with names. And I don't know if it's just because I've gotten a little bit older or if I just am busier now that I have kids and a family, but I am terrible at remembering people's names. And I even called my neighbor the wrong name the other day. It was so embarrassing. So awkward. I apologized profusely. I really, really wanted to call them the right name. I started writing down people's names in my notes app on my phone just so I could remember them. So there's a tip for you. Also, just having a name association. If you meet someone, think about someone and a TV show that you know with that same name or something that associates it in your brain just so you can remember. That's my tip to you because I have been having to do that so much lately. If I see my neighbor out and I just want to say a quick hi, have a quick small talk, maybe they are doing some gardening or some yard work, I'll say, hey guys, looks like you're busy over there. And they might respond really friendly, like, oh yeah, we're working on our yard, we're working on our garden. I often do vegetable gardening in my yard, so when I see my neighbors, they say, oh, you're doing gardening over there, and I start talking about the tomatoes and the cucumbers and the zucchinis that I'm planting. So it's just a really good way to start up a small talk conversation. Just, hey, what are you doing over there? Oh, hey, looks like you're working pretty hard over there. It's just an invitation to talk about what they're doing. Or if they don't feel like talking, they can say, yep, we're busy. Have a good day. Maybe this way to introduce a conversation is a little bit hard for you. So you could just give a compliment if you see your neighbor out in the yard, especially if it's spring or summer. You could say, oh, your yard is beautiful, or your garden is beautiful.
The garden is looking great, Sydney!
Give them a quick compliment on something in their yard that you know that they've been working on or taking pride in, which means they've been working to make it look nice. Let's talk about some phrases to talk about the weather with your neighbor, because of course anyone can talk about the weather. It's a universal human experience. So if you just don't know what to talk about with your neighbor, bring up the weather, especially if you find yourself anywhere in the middle of the United States. Our weather is very unpredictable and it changes so much here that it's kind of an interesting topic of conversation. If it's been raining a lot, you could say to your neighbor in passing, you could say, oh, I can't take any more of this rain. This just means you don't want it to keep raining. It's been raining so much. Yeah, they'll probably agree with you and you guys can have a nice small talk conversation. When I am walking in the neighborhood and I see someone that I know, and I just want to quickly walk by and say hi, they'll say, hey, how's it going? I'll say, oh, gorgeous weather that we're having lately.
Enjoy this gorgeous weather.
And they will agree, and it's a pleasant conversation, and then we say goodbye. And it's just a really friendly topic of conversation. Oh, gorgeous weather we're having lately. I literally just said this to my neighbor last night. I liked them. I wanted to say hi to them, but I know they were walking and I was walking, so we didn't have time for a long conversation. Sometimes if I see my neighbor, I say, oh, gotta love this weather, right? If it's very nice outside. So it's not too hot right now. It's not too cool because it's spring. So I'll say, gotta love this weather that we're having. And usually, again, the neighbor will agree, or whoever you're talking to in your small talk conversation. And it's just a pleasant way to have a very short, simple conversation. You just say to them, gotta love this weather that we're having. If it's very hot outside, you could say, hey, stay cool.
Stay cool. Stay cool.
And this is, again, a really good way to just have a simple weather conversation. Stay cool. If you have kids, this next section of the video will be really important to you because when you move to a new neighborhood, your kids want to have friends that live close by. So here are some phrases that you could use to help, talk to other people in the neighborhood that have kids and maybe even help find friends for your kids. If you're walking and you see children in your neighborhood that are around the same age as your children, maybe your kids are 5 and their kids look 5 or 6, maybe even 7, you could say, oh, hi, how are you guys doing? Our kids look to be about the same age.
Yeah, around the same age as yours.
And then that kind of opens the conversation. Oh, this is our son, Joey, he's 5. This is our son, Charlie, he's 6. Whatever it might be. So this just helps you kind of start the conversation, especially talking about your kids. I find when you have a conversation with someone, an adult, and you talk about your kids, it's very easy to have a conversation and to have a lot to talk about because parents just love their kids so much that they could talk all day about their kids. One phrase that we use in the United States is play date. So this means a time for our kids to play while we hang out as adults. So you could say we should set up a play date sometime.
Maybe we could set up a play date for the kids sometime.
And if your kids are younger, it might not be appropriate for your kid to just go over to their house by themselves for the first time. So if you say a play date, this means, you can meet up with the parents and maybe you guys could go to a park or another public place where you can get to know the family and the kids can get to know each other as well. We should set up a play date sometime. This just suggests that you think your kids would like to play together and you'd like to talk to them as an adult too. Sometimes I say to my neighbors that have kids, hey, feel free to stop by anytime. This means if my kids are playing in the yard, I'm usually working in my yard or working in my garden, you can stop and kids can play for a minute and we can chat. This is, again, just a really friendly, casual invitation to hang out as families. When you're new to a community and a neighborhood, you might want to ask about the schools because the schools can be so different everywhere in the United States. So you could say, how are the schools around here? Or if there are many different schools that your kids could go to in the area, you could ask another parent, hey, what school is your child or your kids enrolled in? This is just helping to understand what school that their kids go to, and usually they'll talk about if they recommend it or if they would recommend a different school. And if you really, really get to know your neighbor and you think maybe it would be easy if our kids could drive in the same car to school, we could switch off. We use the word carpool. We should carpool someday.
DJ Dad has to carpool.
This means, I'll drive your kids one day and you drive my kids one day. Some people even carpool with their neighbors to work. If they work in a similar area, they take turns driving so that they can save money on gas, carpooling. It's less common in the United States, but it's a good word to know, to carpool. This means you ride together in the same car in order to save gas.
Hey, Adele. Yes? How's your neighbor doing lately? I know she's getting old.
I don't know. Her health has really taken a turn for the worse lately. I haven't heard a peep from her. When I think about it, let me just give her a call. Hey, Susie? Is that you? Oh, good. Are you doing okay? Okay, just checking in. We'll talk more soon. Bye. Good news. Susie is actually doing great. She's out of town. That's why her apartment's been so quiet lately. Good. That could have gotten pretty heavy if her health had gotten worse. What about your other neighbors? Do you hear from them? Well, the Munozes next door, they just really keep to themselves. But the Shevchenkos, they live right across the hallway. They are social butterflies. They're always calling me to have coffee. Do they live kitty corner from your apartment in the hallway? Yes, that's their unit. And, sometimes I talk to Sheila. She lives directly below me. But she can just talk your ear off sometimes. And when she starts talking about her kids, I can't get a word in edgewise. Well, you know how people get when it comes to their kids. They're so obsessed. Yeah, I can't blame her. But I'm so glad you came over. Sometimes my neighbors just drive me up a wall. We often say that someone's health has taken a turn for the worse when we think that they might be close to death, honestly. I know it's a very dark subject, but this is a really common way to use this phrase. Or if you're having a problem and it's just getting worse and you don't think it can get better because it's gone so bad, it's really common to say, well, this is taking a turn for the worse. If you're having a bad day and it just gets worse and worse and worse, you could say, this day has taken a turn for the worse. And usually when this happens, it means you're pretty surprised about it. Things were going okay, but then they just started going really, really bad. They take a turn for the worst. A common way that native English speakers will say that something or someone is really quiet is they'll say, I haven't heard a peep. Or if they're describing a person who's just being really quiet, especially a child that you would normally expect to be quite loud, you could say, I haven't heard a peep from them. And for some reason, we say peep instead of a word, or just we haven't heard any noises. And sometimes if we have a friend that hasn't called or texted us in a while, we could say, wow, I haven't heard a peep from them lately. This means I haven't heard a call or a text from them lately. So this next phrase, I was actually really inspired by a movie, Back to the Future. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's an absolute 80s classic, but the main character goes back 30 years from 1985 into the 50s. And when he says something is pretty heavy, everyone says,
Why are you talking about weight? What do you mean? And so this inspired me to teach you this phrase because we commonly say that something is heavy if it's heavy emotionally, if it makes us sad or if it makes us feel a lot of feelings. So this phrase apparently was not common before, and in the 80s it became much more common, and today anyone that you talk to would know what you're saying if you say, wow, that's very heavy. If you're not talking about weight, if it's in the context of an emotional conversation or someone tells you something very sad, you can say, that's so heavy. If you want to describe someone who's introverted or very quiet, they don't like to socialize, they might say hi, but they won't talk to you about their life, you can say they keep to themselves. So maybe you keep to yourself, maybe you don't like to talk to a lot of strangers or a lot of new people. That just means you're very introverted and you're maybe a little bit shy as well. The opposite of saying that someone keeps to themselves is to say that someone is a social butterfly. This is the most common way to say that someone is very extroverted. They like to socialize, they like to chat with friends, and they like to make new friends. They're a total social butterfly. So this phrase in the United States, kitty corner, means that something is located in the opposite corner from you. So think about being on a street, and if you say something's kitty corner, it's diagonal from you. Some places in the United States say catty corner, but according to my research, it's more common to say kitty corner, but you never know if you meet an American if they'll say catty corner, which just sounds funny to me. Both words really are funny, kitty corner and catty corner. A good way to say that someone just does not stop talking and talking and talking and talking, they talk a lot, they're very talkative, is to say they talk your ear off. This is a classic idiom to describe someone who talks a lot, and typically we use this in a negative way, like, oh, she talked my ear off today. This means she talked so much, I was just trying to get out of the conversation. So usually if someone talks your ear off, you're not that interested in what they have to say, or maybe they're just talking a lot about themselves. Going right along with talking someone's ear off, if you want to say that someone is talking so much that you're not able to add to the conversation, you can say that you can't get a word in edgewise. This is a really unique phrase that's used really commonly in the United States. Sometimes if there's a family with two brothers or two sisters, and one of the brothers likes to talk a lot, we'll say, oh, the other brother just can't get a word in edgewise. It means they're so quiet due to the fact that the other person talks so much. A really common conversational phrase is to say, you know how people get. This could be confusing at first, but it just means you know how people act, or you know what people act like. So it just means that this is common behavior for most people. A good example that comes to mind is you know how people get when there's free food. They start getting really hungry and they start getting in line trying to get their free food. So most people, if there's free food, they're trying to get some. You know how people get. A great idiom to say that someone is annoying is to say that they drive you up a wall. So in our conversation today, the neighbors drive this person up a wall. That means they annoy them. And even though they're friends with their neighbors and they like to chat with them quite often, they kind of annoy them at the end of the day. So just a very common idiom that's used here in the United States, to drive someone up a wall. It means to annoy. A very interesting phrase that English speakers use to call attention to something, and this phrase is really casual, but you can use it with your friends, or you would be able to use this phrase in a professional situation, is you can say, I'd like to note that, and then you explain what you're trying to bring attention to. Let's say you're going to have a race, a running race between your friends, and you want to explain that one person might have an advantage. You might say, I'd like to note that Jill is an Olympic gold medalist. So you're just bringing to the attention that Jill has an advantage over everyone else. Or if you want to bring attention that somebody has a disadvantage, you could say, I'd like to note that Jeff has never run a mile in his life. So it's just like you're having this conversation, and if you're using this phrase, I'd like to note, that just means like Wait, stop real quick. We need to think about this important detail. A really common way this phrase is also used is when you want to say that you did not agree with someone's decision that turned out to be a bad decision. Let me give you a few examples of this. So going back to our running race example, maybe the race doesn't go so well. Maybe somebody even gets hurt. You might say, I'd like to note that I didn't think this race was a very good idea. So we use this phrase to talk about our opinion before something happened. Another way we use this phrase is when we want to call attention to something that we did. Let's say we had an English test and we're really tired and we did good on the test. Someone said, wow, English comes really easy to you. You just want to tell them that you actually studied a lot. So you could say, I'd like to note that I was up all night studying. This test was not easy to me. So you're just calling attention to something that you want someone else to know that they may have not thought about when you use this phrase. I'd like to note.
I'd like to note.
Oh, I'd like to sit in and give notes.
I'd like to note the absence.
Speaking of really good English phrases, I want to explain the next phrase on this list, speaking of. So we use this phrase all the time for transitions when we're speaking in English. If you ever listen to English speaking podcasts, you will hear the hosts of the podcast use this all of the time. So it's kind of like you can use this phrase when you're having a conversation about one subject and a small part of the subject relates to what you want to talk about next. You say, speaking of, and that lets the listener know that you're going to speak about that some more and kind of change subjects. Sometimes we also use this phrase to transition to a new topic because someone reminded us of something that we wanted to bring up or we wanted to say. So maybe you're talking to your friend and they bring up that they just went to a birthday party the other day. And you remember that it's actually your friend's birthday pretty soon. You might say, speaking of birthdays, don't you have a birthday coming up? That means don't you have a birthday in the near future, maybe the next few days or the next few weeks or even the next month. And it's just a good way when you're having especially a small talk conversation to keep the conversation going. You know, you think of something and you want to introduce it as the next topic of conversation. Sometimes I use this phrase, speaking of, in a small talk conversation if I want to ask how someone is doing. So let's say I'm talking to my friend and, I say, yeah, my husband's doing good. Speaking of husbands, how's Miguel, your husband? Or I often like to ask my friends about their own family. So I'll say, oh, speaking of, how's your mom doing? Speaking of, how's your grandma doing? If we get on the subject of family or just any family members, that reminds me to ask them how their family's doing.
Speaking of.
Speaking of.
Speaking of.
Do you know how to use the phrase last minute? This is really important because it can be either an adjective or a noun when you use this phrase. And it's so common amongst English speakers. So I'm going to show you how this phrase can be used as an adjective or a noun, and it can be used to say the exact same thing. You might say, I need to get a last minute gift. My sister's birthday is today. So you're describing the gift as last minute. That's the adjective, last minute. When we use the phrase last minute, it just means you don't have much time to get it. You waited until the last possible time period to get something or to do something. So you don't want to typically do things last minute because you're usually rushed and it means that you maybe procrastinated them. But sometimes we can't help doing things last minute because, things just come up and we have to work with the time that we have. So we can use that phrase last minute to describe the gift, or we can say, I went shopping at the last minute for my sister's birthday gift. So in this sentence, we're using the phrase as a noun. We went shopping at the last minute. It's a time that we went to go shopping. I didn't know I was going to the movies tonight. It was a last minute decision. So it was a late decision. We didn't plan going to the movies all week. We just decided right before to buy tickets and go. So we're describing the situation as last minute here. Or we can say, I decided at the last minute that we are going to the movies tonight. So this sentence means the exact same thing. We did think a lot about this decision beforehand, but we're saying we decided at the last minute. So we're using this phrase as a noun. So last minute is so useful in English. You'll hear it all the time.
Oh, last minute gift.
See this last minute?
Last minute change.
Are you studying collocations in English? So collocations are usually two words that go together, or a phrase and a word that typically goes together. For this next phrase, off and on, there are a ton of really common collocations that go along with it. So if you learn these, you'll be understanding them very easily in English now that I've brought them to your attention. So when we talk about something happening off and on, it means exactly as you would guess. It means it starts and stops. It begins and starts. So we often say it's raining off and on. So that means it's not continuously raining. It hasn't been raining all day. Maybe it will rain for an hour, and then it will stop for an hour, and then it will rain for 5 minutes and stop for another hour, and then it will rain for another 2 hours, something like that. So we can say it's raining off and on. We can say it's snowing off and on, which means the exact same thing except for it's snow. Sometimes if two people date and then they break up and then they get back together again and have a romantic relationship and date and then break up, we say they have been dating off and on for 2 years, or they've been dating off and on for a couple months. So their relationship isn't very serious because sometimes they break up and they're not together. If you're working off and on, that means you aren't employed. You don't have a job full time. Maybe you do a few odd jobs and you take some time off, and then you find another job and work for a season of the year. Maybe you have a summer job and then you have some time off. So you could say, I've been working on and off. Or you can say, I've been working off and on. They really mean the same thing. You can say off and on or on and off in all of these phrases. Finally, another common collocation is sleeping on and off. I was sleeping on and off all night. That means you kept waking up and then you'd go back to sleep.
Off and on?
On and off.
Off and on.
One phrase that I really like to teach is the phrase, do the math. It's just a very casual way to say that you are going to figure out the exact number. But we can also use this phrase to say, like, we didn't want to figure out exactly how something happened. Or if someone says, how old are you? You can say, well, I grew up listening to cassette tapes, those old tapes that you would listen to music on. And you can say, you can do the math. That means I'm not going to tell you exactly how old I am, but you can kind of guess based off what I told you. Now, so there's that way to use this phrase, but we can also just say, I didn't want to do the math, so I bought some extra food for everyone. That means I didn't want to calculate exactly how much food we need for each person, so I just bought a lot. I didn't do the math, but there should be enough. This just means you didn't officially do any calculations or you didn't use any numbers. You just kind of guess. So we can say, I did the math, which means you didn't guess, you figured it out. Or commonly we say, I didn't do the math, which means we didn't officially figure out, we just guessed how much we would need.
Do the math, Kimmy.
Let's do the math.
Right. Let's do the math.
The next English phrase comes from the idea that if you throw mud at the wall, you can see what sticks. You can see how much will stick. So this is just saying that, you're just going to throw out a few ideas and you'll see which one actually works. I think of this phrase a lot for naming things. Let's say you started a business and you're not sure what you want to call your business yet, but you're going to try out a few name ideas and you'll say, I'll see what sticks. So you'll see what people actually like to call your business or what ends up sounding good or being the easiest to use as your business name. If you're writing a song, you might try out a few different melodies and see what sticks in the song. So that just means you'll see, which one will work the best. And you're not set on one and you're not trying to be super official about each one. So you just see what works by using the different melodies. So when you say we're just seeing what sticks, it means you're going to see which idea works based on just trying them all very casually. I love using this next phrase in English, from the get-go. If you want to say from the beginning, this is kind of a casual slang way to say it, from the get-go. So we often say, I didn't like this from the get-go. That means you didn't like it from the beginning. Or I was a big fan of this from the get-go. That means you really like something from the beginning, maybe even before it was popular. Maybe your friend buys a piece of clothing because they think it's really trendy, and you say, I really don't like that, you shouldn't buy it. And then eventually they say, wow, I shouldn't have bought this new shirt. I shouldn't have bought these cargo pants. You can say, well, I told you I didn't like it from the get-go. That means from the beginning, when you first introduced the idea, from the get-go, that's when I told you I didn't like it.
Me from the get-go.
From the get-go?
Right from the get-go.
If you ever are invited to an outing, a lunch, a dinner, or a party in the United States, you might be able to respond that you are in or you are out. So if you want to say that you're in, count us in. This phrase means that you can depend on me coming to the party or coming to the outing. Or if you want to say that you don't want to go, you can say, count me out. So don't count me in your numbers. I'm out. I'm not going. Your friend might say, I hope you can make it to my party on Saturday. And you look at your calendar, there's nothing there. You might respond with, count me in. Or if you are in a work situation, commonly people will say, hey, we're going to lunch. Do you want to come? You can say, count me in. That means I can go. Or count me out. Sorry, I can't go. You can also say this phrase, count me out, if someone was, assuming that you were going to do something. Hey, we're all going skydiving. Let's go. You can say, count me out. I am afraid of heights. That means don't depend on me going. I'm not going. Count me out. So it can be very definite too when you really don't want to do something. You can definitely use these phrases to ask if someone is going to do something. Just like before, you can say, can we count you in for lunch today? And the person might say, yes, count me in, or count me out.
You're right. Count us in.
Count us in.
Me. Count me out.
So you probably already know this phrase or this idea, but you probably don't know the actual words for it. The phrase is process of elimination. So when you're taking a test and it's a multiple answer test, sometimes you don't know the right answer. Sometimes you just don't know the answer to the test. But by the process of elimination, that means getting rid of the wrong answers, you can make a pretty good guess on what the answer is. So when you're using the process of elimination, it just means you're getting rid of things that you know are not wrong or bad choices, and you're going to go with whatever is left after everything else is eliminated or gotten rid of. So let's say you're doing just a puzzle and you have a few pieces left and you can't figure out where, the piece is going to fit. You can try every piece in the same spot in the puzzle, and you can eliminate the pieces if they don't work, and eventually you'll at least have one piece that should work. Unless you're like me and you lose pieces to the puzzle, then your puzzle probably won't get completed. But process of elimination just means, considering every choice and either eliminating it or deciding that it's the correct answer.
Process of elimination.
Okay, process of elimination.
Simple process of elimination.
The last phrase I really like to teach slowly to English learners because the verb to refer can mean a few different things, and you really need to know the context of how you're using it in order to understand it. So let's talk about a few of the uses. First, we can use refer to mean direct. So the phrase that I'm going to teach you is refer to. So you can use refer to someone on something, like a subject. So you can say, refer to your boss on your paid time off or your vacation time. So that means don't ask anyone else at the company. Refer or direct your questions to your boss. Now we can also use the verb refer to mean that something means something else. So you can say, refer to me as Miss Kayla. That means call me Miss Kayla. Don't actually call me Miss Kayla. You can just call me Kayla. But just for example, if you want someone to call you a different name than, your name on your government documents, you can say, oh, you can refer to me as Jim, or you can refer to me as Will instead of William. So this is just one way that it's used. Let's talk a little bit more about the phrase refer to someone on something. This phrase comes up a ton in email, especially in the workplace. So you might get an email about your paychecks and it might say, refer to Susie on all matters payroll. So payroll is the department or the subject of getting pay at work or paycheck at work. And all of your questions are going to go to Susie because it says refer to Susie on payroll questions or refer to Susie on payroll. This just means direct or, everything needs to go to Susie relating to this subject. Refer to her. Go to her. So this phrase is a little bit difficult to use, but you'll start hearing it a lot, especially as you work more in English.